So in the computer model it was predicted that that grass would no longer grow after about year 20 or whatever, even in 100 stems. So everything that we thought would happen did not happen. Now in terms of the landowner, he's still able to get full rental yield from the grazier for this area, and also he's now, some of these trees can be cropped for hurley sticks if they're, you know, some of them are around 30 centimetre diameter at breast height. And just look at it, you know, so it's just a scientific trial, but so it's a beautiful complement to the landscape. I think it's beautiful. It's an incredible feeling. The trees are one of the biggest problems in agroforestry, where timber is a key thing, is that we start with very poor genetic stock. In fact, we could call British forestry dysgenic, because British woodlands and forests were managed in a way where the best trees were removed. In Germany, where they know about forestry, the best trees would be left as mother trees, and the genetics slowly improve. You keep leaving them and using the seed from the... We do the opposite. We remove the good ones, so we planted weeds. These are weeds. They couldn't be worse in terms of the genetic stock.
If you're redoing this, what would you plant now? Or how would you do it differently?
So the second big lesson we learned about this was that the other problem with forestry is it tended to look at this idea of growing uniform trees like telegraph poles, using lots of energy to add value and complexity onto that homogeneity, treating them like plastic. That's completely the wrong way if you want to make profit. You should grow the product, not the tree. So we need to ask the question, what is the product? And within low carbon futures and export potential to China and India, it's limitless. We can grow incredible range of products we've not even thought of in the UK. So I'm working with a guy in Kent on agroforestry. He's just exported £60,000 worth of hazelnut oil to China. Nobody in Kent know about growing trees for hazelnut oil. They've only been working down there for 800 years trying to grow hazel. It's the wrong system. We don't want cob nuts with high labour costs trying to get in through the plat. We want single stem trees, free husking nuts, mechanically harvested, and then a cold press. That's a completely different ball game in terms of the configuration of the system to the traditional method. So the best thing we can do is forget anything you ever knew. That's the just think about the product and what people want and try to do that. So here we didn't know what we were doing. We're just scientists wanting to look at the ecophysiology, the interactions between the trees and the grass. So the product crept up behind us, hit us on the head, and it was a hurley stick. So hurley sticks are harvested. It's the butt log, the bottom part, down about 2 foot into the ground. So the best trees are widely spaced with anchor roots. So you get these big anchor roots. None of this is conventional forestry knowledge. In fact, good old John Evelyn, one of my heroes who wrote the first textbook on forestry called Silver in the 17th century, Age of Enlightenment excluded all indigenous knowledge. It wasn't good. So all the oral traditions of how we could use trees, I'm rediscovering. I'm looking at archives going back to the 16th and 15th century. And from that I discovered that the reason Herefordshire is good in cider is because they knew how to manage hedgerows. From the crab you can top work to get fruit. And by growing, and this is from seed. Now orchards in the UK are the most heavily intensively sprayed systems in the whole of horticulture. So actually if you're in a diverse system, the idea of a root stock and a named variety and small trees is crazy. That's not the way to grow trees. What is the product? Is it a blend or is it a pure thing? If wheat is a blend, why the hell do we just grow a single variety? Why don't we harvest a blend of several varieties all in the same field? So forget everything. The most important message today is to forget everything and ask this very open question. What is the product now that people want? And what are they going to want over the next 10 years after Brexit, in the face of increasing concerns about the UK's carbon footprint outside the UK? We're very good at showing our carbon footprint, but we've got the boundary. So we're exporting and importing very poor carbon behaviour. So we need to think about import substitution and exports.
Steve, when these trees were planted,
Yeah.
there were different densities.
Yeah,
The growth rates of the trees are a little different.
right, yeah.
Competition, you can see that from here. Just explain that a little bit.
Right, so as I said, the first thing we learned was that this model, that all the best scientists, there was a group of 21 of us, Forestry Commission, Institute for Grassland Research, Open University, several other people, Institute of Terrestrial Ecology at the time, predicted there would be no grass growth. So how the hell did that go wrong? Well, they didn't know that deciduous trees had no leaves on. So if you put that in the model, like I said before, 60% of the sward productivity occurs in that period in the year when ash has no leaves.
So you chose ash because it was the latest?
No, we hadn't got a clue. We hadn't got a clue. So we asked the Forestry Commission what trees might be useful for lowland pasture, because nobody had a clue. You know, British forestry is based on the production of pit props. That's where it comes from. The energy self-sufficiency after the First World War. There wasn't even a book on broadleaves until 1975. So we chose that. So they said there's this kind of middling group of trees. You know, oak's very nice. Get a good price for oak. It's going to take 100 years. There's this middling group of trees, intermediate growth: cherry, sycamore, and ash. Why don't you try that? So that's why we chose them, as opposed to the fast-growing trees like the willow and the alder and the poplar. Anyway, we stuck with these ash, terrible genetic stock, stick them in the ground. What happens? Well, to start from the beginning, because how the heck do you protect trees, you know, from livestock? That is the fundamental problem with silvopastoral systems. How can we protect the trees from livestock cheaply? So you can see, well, so you know, I was here with a group planting the trees, and the sheep were looking at us, licking their lips, and it was like they were conspiring and laughing, you know. Thank you very much, Steve, for what you're doing, because we got rabbit guards. We went away and wallop, the sheep just were so attracted to these trees, stripping off as much bark in as quickly as possible. So I had to move from rabbit guards to stakes with netlon to protect them. And then they would lean on them and try and lift up the netlon, so changing the staples. Not easy even to protect from a sheep. Cattle at that time of establishment was a complete no-no. There was an incredible, beautiful statistical design of cattle silvopastoral systems, all randomised different treatments, you know, split plot analysis for analysis of variance. Cattle can come in these areas. The cattle were let in, cleared the whole lot. That was the end of the trial. They smashed everything to pieces, the whole lot. So do that, and then that was all right for a while, and then we discovered this miraculous product called Wobra, which is a German product, which is a kind of a glue with sand in it, and we painted it on, and the sheep got grit in the mouth, and that was the end of it. Not only did they tell all the youngsters not to do it, every subsequent flock, somehow they left some sort of message behind. Every subsequent flock that came in didn't bother. Really bizarre. I don't know how that works. So we applied it for a year and never applied it again. It's only you know, you can imagine this, when the sheep are rubbing things off, it only lasted for about 3 years. You might see some of it there. Anyway, so there's some deer damage you can see, but that we can tolerate the deer. But there's always a nasty cow, and yesterday I saw a bit of damage, so we now need to rethink. The cows didn't get the message. So that's a practical thing about the establishment. So we measured the sward growth, and in a 10-metre spacing we found that the productivity carried on, but there was some change in the floristic composition.
Yeah,
as we got closer to the trunks, more broadleaves, more interest. Look at the trees. The diameter increment in this plot was far greater than in the 5-metre plot, which has more height growth. So as a grower, wow, trees have adaptive geometry. Tell me the shape, what do you want? I'll plant the spacing and get you the tree you want. So in the old days, most of the value from oak was in crook frames for ships and houses. So don't grow it in a continuous canopy in a woodland, but get them from the edge or the hedgerow.
Certainly what I'm visiting here over the years, what you've seen is, as you say, the tighter the spacing of the trees, the slimmer the trunk and the taller the tree, wider spacing, broader trunk, squatter tree, and the trees around the edge have a much broader canopy, whereas the ones in the middle tend to go up more.
Well, let's just move to this tree. You'll see half and half. Different about this plot.
The trees are taller.
Correct.
Very little grass.
No grass. So this did stop, well, hardly any grass. It's just, and the not enough for the cattle to be bothered with. So what vegetation do we have?
Weeds.
Or nettle, isn't it? Dock.
And what does that indicate?
High nitrogen.
Correct. And why is that?
Leaf brook.
No. Any other suggestions?
The cattle eat sheltering.
Yeah. So this is a camping area for the cattle. So the nitrogen levels in here would be massive compared to what's over there.
Wouldn't the cows eat the nettles?
No, well, they don't seem to be
Even the
doing.
tops of them. See
Just like the last
flip the
bits.
tops.
So you've got changes in the soil chemical properties. You've got changes in soil physical properties. There's greater compaction here. So just by planting a few trees around a different spacing, you change the nature of the ecosystem completely. Just by spacing. This is a different world in here to over there, both for the trees. Now what else might be happening in terms of, well they've gone now, but I was going to ask the cows, as far as they're concerned, what might they get from this?
What shade on?
Yeah, when it's a really hot day, not half notice. You can come, I mean, a couple of days ago when it was that heat wave, it was unbelievably cool in here.
Darker here.
Darker here. What about fly striking the sheep or whatever? It's a different ball game, and we're all discovering this. We don't know all this. This is by accident. You plant the things and you learn what happens. And as a good farmer or as a good grower, a stockman or whatever, you should look at the animals. What the heck are they doing? And why are they doing it? So then the other thing I thought, well, let's read the forestry book, and it talked about form pruning. So I got my gang with the pruning saws and started to lop some of the branches off the ash when they're in leaf, and a stampede happened. I mean, this is not bad pasture. They seem to be all very happy and munching away. But my God, when the ash leaves are on the floor, there's something in there they really, really want. And then doing some further scientific research, I thought, well, trees are all trees. All the leaves are the same. They're not like grass leaves. The hazel has 100 times more concentration of calcium than other trees. Tree chemistry is not really studied very much, and we don't know what's in the leaf, and it's incredibly variable. Incredibly, 100 times more in hazel. What the heck is all that about? Why is that? And so, if anything needs calcium, then so there's the medicine. There's all this. Again, unfortunately, most of the people that wrote the farming books were the gentry or well-connected people They did a lot of the local stock knowledge about what things they browsed in the hedgerow. If an animal was sick, what mixture of leaves would you give it? We still need to collect this indigenous knowledge. It's not in any books. So that's another area that we need to go back to in agroforestry, indigenous knowledge. Luckily, the Germans and everybody else worship this indigenous knowledge, and they recorded it. In the Age of Enlightenment, we didn't. We just wanted scientific knowledge and poo-pooed a lot of all this as suspicion or not worth noting down. So we've dealt with the establishment, we've dealt with the change in the flora. For me, the most exciting thing is, results-based payments now, because we need very simple biodiversity scores for farmers. We can't rely on experts to come along and measure every little thing in order for us to get our payments for biodiversity. So if you look at the meaning of the word biodiversity, it's a crazy word because it tries to sum up three different things. You've got the richness of species, you've got the variety of the genetics within a species, so agrobiodiversity would be relevant to that. But the main thing for me that's simple to count is the number of ecosystems or habitats. So for me this is incredible. Stick a few trees in, we've got a completely different habitat, we've got almost a different ecosystem going on. So we can count that, show, we should be rewarded for that in the future. Same thing we need, like Steve said about monitoring, we want monitoring where a child could validate and measure that the farmers complied. We don't want to leave this in the hands of experts.
In terms of accidental design,
yes,
some of this is a bit of accidental design, but
yeah,
one of the key components there is actually, you pointed out, is that you've got the leaf component harvesting solar radiation at a different time from the grass.
yeah,
And that's quite key. So when people are thinking about designing your systems, either by purpose or by accident, actually making sure that they're not the two components or the various components aren't competing with each other in the same space and time is absolutely key.
So we've ended up with this magic number 3 in the design of agroforestry. So there are 3 yield advantage mechanisms that are very important to know about if you want to optimize agroforestry. The first idea is partitioning or sharing of resources in time and space. So we just looked at an idea of temporal partitioning, light. Another one could be spatial. Through mycorrhizae associations with the trees, where are they feeding now? Where are they getting their nutrients from? So actually, is this tree actually connected with the one right over there, for instance? What's this spatial use of resources? We don't really know very much about that, but quite clear that the spatial area that the grasses are getting their nutrients from is different to the trees. So they can share resources rather than competing. The second mechanism is what we call synthesis, which is where there's a chemical change in the environment brought about by one of the plants. Wasn't there before, so can anybody give an example of that?
Fiction older.
Yeah, so it could be nitrogen that was available in the air as atmospheric nitrogen, but the plant, a legume or whatever, or older uses Frankia, has now fixed that nitrogen. That's a chemical change. If it's a willow, you've got salicylic acid, and now salicins are known to be plant activators. When they're flushed out of the leaves, they'll tell other plants that disease is on the way. So there's this whole chemical ecology that we're only just beginning to discover. So we can design the system using these chemical interactions. So reduce pests, make crops, plant tonics, make plants aware of what's coming their way, so they can get the RNA cranked up and get things ready. The third mechanism is what we call modulation, which is a physical change. We brought about a physical change in the environment which could yield to a yield advantage. Anybody got any examples of that?
Reduce wind speed, higher temperature.
Reduce wind speed,
climate.
yeah, all physical changes. So the system I worked on in China with paolonia, that's now at 2 million hectares. We use the trees to train up black pepper. So using the trees as, you know, as a physical support. All these design options using the physical architecture. So that's the 3 different dimensions of the ecological basis of yield advantage in mixed cropping and agroforestry. The other thing is something even as simple as yield, which everybody thinks they know what yield is. Well, they don't. Yield is quite a complicated thing. There are 3 different types of yield. So I pity he's not here, John's not here, but the grazier, he comes along and he's a main crop yield optimizer. He's only interested in the live weight gain, or the, you know, that's his measure. So he says, look, Steve, I don't give a damn about your trees as long as I can get my mower round, which he can't, just here. I don't give a damn about your trees. You plant anything in that system as long as it doesn't affect the yield or the income from my main crop. He's just blinkered. He doesn't even see the seed. He just sees live weight gain. The same as when I planted the walnut in the arable. He's exactly the same. He wants the best yield in Hagsburg, what a name of the wheat. Doesn't give a toss what kind of trees I've got. So that's main crop. That's just one mechanism. Another mechanism, completely different, is called feedstock yield. So this person comes in and says, well, actually, my sheep are not here, they're over there. I want to harvest a feedstock to feed these sheep. And all I want is a certain amount of energy and a nutritional profile. And I don't give a damn about where you've gone for the species, Steve. I don't even need to know. So long as you satisfy my feedstock requirement, and that's the same as energy, if it was for energy, so long as it fits it over. So the measure of an improvement there is the total biomass of a feedstock from agroforestry is greater than the highest yielding monoculture. And finally, the most interesting one is the land saving ability of that's mixed crop yield. So in the walnuts, we know we could, on a good day, we could get 10 tonnes per hectare of walnut and maybe 10 tonnes a hectare of wheat as monocultures. What happens when we combine them on the same hectare? If you've got 0.5, if you've got 5 and 5, land equivalent ratio is 1, and there's no advantage. You might as well keep them separate, a lot easier to manage. But we find a land equivalent ratio of 2 early on. So this is vertical farming, where one tree component is, so that's invisible as far as the crop's concerned. So that's combined crop yield. All different measures of yield. The most basic thing in agronomy is more complicated than you think. So the surprising thing is that for me, the other surprise, you see, this was designed for sheep. You know, we didn't want any cattle, but eventually the cattle arrived, and that's been no problem. But I see one of the trees has got some damage, so I'm going to keep an eye on that.
In terms of the cattle and sheep management,
yeah,
has the grazier had to modify his management practice in relation to actually grazing the open areas versus the agroforestry areas?
No, because he's not penned in this field and he's got rotational grazing, it's part of his system. But there was a lot of argument about this bit, because on a grazier's licence he has to sign up for managing the thistles and everything else, and it wasn't. It takes him ages to mow this with his mower to keep the thistles down. So he must have, in his negotiation with the landlord, he must have changed that and said, you know, please let me off a bit. Or
the animals effectively self-select how
they
grazing.
self-select.
When it's really hot or really cold, they come in here,
yeah,
and use it as shelter.
Yeah.
Are they coming in to here all year round?
Yes. Well, no, so he's got this clause, I think every grazer's told they can't have the, I can't remember what that is, but it's not all year round. There is a no-go period, I think, because the soil's... so all the details are in here. Now the other lesson learned is about how to get the best value from wood. So for me, you've got this beautiful thing with all this complexity and beauty, and the only thing we can appear to do in the UK well is to set fire to it. Yeah, so firewood is what the market which most people face. So we have to do a lot of work on this about how can we have more of a wood-based economy, and what are the wood products? We don't know. There's this book by Glessinger written. He studied the Nazi economy, and the Nazis wanted to. They started their work by taking over land to get more forest. They hadn't got as many fossil fuels. They wanted to have a wood-based economy. So we're looking at, how can we substitute for oil-based plastics? What kind of opportunities do we have for getting the maximum value from wood? In Bhutan, where the company's working at the moment, we're looking at how can we eat wood. We'd like to eat it because they love rice and they love buckwheat, but the amount of land is so little at these steep valley bottoms. So let's eat the wood because we've got a lot of wood. So that's a provocative proposition. What might that look like? Because we have the technology to texturize things. I mean, I'm trying to lose weight at the moment, eating bare naked noodles, which are virtually 0 calorie. They fill me up, and they're made from a really strange plant that doesn't have the normal carbohydrate. It has glucosamines, so that passes through the body. So, I mean, the common thing is if you eat shiitake, effectively you're eating wood. Fungi know how to convert wood into foods, so do to protozoa. But I think the low carbon future is about a wood-based economy. So that's the future. But now, so Hurley sticks. The most profitable agroforestry system at the moment in the UK is cricket-bat willow, and that. I've been working in India, they tried for ages to grow cricket-bat willow. They've now given up. So there's an incredible expanding market for that product. The Chinese are beginning to get interested in cricket. These are massive markets. And cricket-bat willow, that's a crop after 12, in a good site, 12 years, maybe 15 years. Looking at £375 a tree last year. And you've got all your income from your grazing, plus all your stewardship payments, etc., etc. They come along. So the product again is in the butt log. So you're working with a partner to get the product, which is the butt log, and then you've got 60% of the biomass to get more money. So you've got the firewood from the top end, and if it's willow, you've got the basket makers will pay for the branches. So lots of different streams of income.